Good evening. This is the 30 videos in 30 days project from DreamSideOut. This is the 28th of November, and that means it's video number 28, and that means we're getting right down to the wire here on the 30-day video project. Once again, it's a nice rainy evening here in the Pacific Northwest, and I have everything buttoned up. Rain on the roof in my little tin-roofed art studio. I think box vans make a good art studio. If you bounce the light off of the aluminum ceiling, it just illuminates the whole place. It's kind of interesting. I think I just got an idea tonight on how I'm going to light this place up in here a little better. Tonight, first of all, I want to start out by saying a big thank you to all of my viewers who've been commenting over the past, 30 days, but especially recently when I've been showing the art. I've been getting lots of really positive encouragement, and I really appreciate that from you guys, and lots of really nice offers for various things from people, and I want to thank you for that. I thought I'd just address a comment. There's one fellow YouTuber and fellow artist who commented a few times, and I'm really glad he came over and commented on my channel, because I've watched his channel quite a bit. That is Mr. BlindViews. If you haven't watched BlindViews, you guys are missing out. He's a guy that puts together a very entertaining channel, and go check him out if you haven't. He's kind of got the satirical side of things. He comments and reports on other YouTube van dwellers, and kind of, he has an edgy way of commenting about them. It's really kind of funny. So, and he just, you can tell he does a lot of tight work into his YouTube channel. I'm very, I hope I can bring my channel up to somewhere close to that level of quality, because he obviously puts a lot of work into his editing and his imagery, and he has all kinds of interesting things he does on the channel to make it interesting. And not only that, he's an artist. He draws, and he does time-lapse drawings. But here's the thing about it. He's legally blind. He's legally blind. I mean, he can see a little bit, but not very much. Yet, at the same time, he does pretty amazing drawings, and that's impressive. And so he's an example of a guy that takes what he's got, puts it together, and makes something out of it, and I just think that's cool. Anyway, I want to read one of his comments here, because I didn't want to write a novel on my comment section. That's why sometimes people ask these profound questions, and I could sit there and write a whole page to answer. But I'll try to keep this as efficient and brief as possible. BlindViews says, "Great job on the proportions. I find that hands and feet can be very difficult to get proportions correct. Very well done. The detail is handled well without getting overdone and muddy. That is most evident in the wing feathers. I like that aggressive tooth of the paper. Do you prefer that type of paper? I use a less toothy paper for graphite and save the aggressive tooth for colored pencils for all the layering and blending. Sorry for the questions. I'm not trained, so I often ask talented people how they approach things, see if my experimental stabs in the dark are the correct way of doing things. I sometimes get advice that makes things easier." Okay, well, man, first of all, let me address the trained issue. I did go to art school, but that doesn't mean I'm trained, right? I went to art school during a time when The art professors were all abstract expressionists, and I basically had to teach myself to draw during that period of time. And then I stuck with it for many years after that and learned a lot of things. So I understand, you know, if you're an artist, you're always self-taught. You're always self-taught. It's always a matter of how much you put into it, and whether you go to an art school or not, that's really not the big deal. The big deal is whether you stick to it. Now, I got some good, I guess, theory and philosophical art philosophy, if you will, from some mentors when I was in art school. Anyway, that's just to make to answer that part of the question, that part of the comment. You say you want to see if you're doing it correctly. Well, that's the point. If it's working for you, man, you're doing it correctly, and I can tell you by looking at your pictures, you're doing something right. Okay, I think there are some things you can think about if you're doing art that you want to have. If you want it to last, you know, you don't want it to deteriorate over time, then you want to think about the materials you're using. And that's something I actually did learn in art school. Techniques, that was probably an interesting course I took. We had to take a class one time where we had to pick a master painting and of any painting and reproduce the exact techniques that they used on that painting. We didn't have to reproduce the whole painting. We just had to take a little portion of it, like about this big, and then execute that part of the painting exactly as it would have been done in the time that it was done. So I learned a lot from that little experience. And one of the big things that was important in art back then, as it is now, in terms of technique, is executing something so that it'll stand the test of time. So, therefore, you want to be conscious of the type of paper you use, the quality of the paper. The tooth of the paper, that's one thing, but the quality of that paper, and this is one of the reasons I use Arches paper. You know, I use a lot of Arches 300-pound paper, largely because it's very stiff. I mean, it's so stiff you can, well, hang on a second. This is so stiff, I could use it as wallboard on my van. I could just put this right here and you know, use it, and it absorbs water because it's watercolor paper, okay? But this is smooth hot pressed. This particular sheet is smooth hot pressed. But you can also get, some of the stuff I showed up close was cold pressed paper, which has the texture to it. And yeah, you just use it for whatever you want to get that effect. You know, I'm lousy at English. This is why I went into art instead of English, right? I can't talk. You use the paper that works for the effect that you want to achieve. Is that better? And so, yeah, colored pencils on textured paper is great. I understand that. Yeah, so is watercolor, so is dry brush, so is acrylic. I've used a lot of those mediums on textured Arches paper. Sometimes I go to smooth hot pressed Arches paper. But it's nice paper because it doesn't buckle when you use it with water soluble media. Anyway, I'm pounding on that one enough, I think. But that's all I can say. The technique part is just, I think, mostly about how much longevity you want to have in your art. Do you want it to deteriorate in 5 years because you used high acid content paper and it just, you know, fell apart? Or do you want it to last the test of time? These drawings of mine, I'm amazed at the condition they're in. They've been sitting in a storage room for a long time and they're still in pretty good shape. So that's something to think about. Yeah, I think that's, well, I guess that wasn't as much of a novel as I thought it was. He says, I find hands and feet to be very difficult to get proportions correct. Yeah, well, that's the part where there's no easy formula. There's two things I've done over the years, and I'm not claiming to be a master at it by any means. I still work at it, I still struggle with it, and the struggle is important because you can't start accepting something too much. You'll never improve if you're too comfortable with things. So what I do is I do life drawing. I go to places where artists gather, and any city has these kinds of things going on. If you look on YouTube or on Craigslist or something, you'll find the art meetups. Every major city has these, and some of the rural areas too. They hire an art model, they usually charge so much per hour, and you have a 3 or 4 hour session, and a group of artists sit around, and somebody's in charge of the session and poses the model, directs the model into different poses throughout the session, and you sit there and you draw from life. And that's how you learn. You just do it over and 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 over again. And that's why I have so many drawings stacked up. A lot of those are just, failures of attempts that didn't work out, And there's times when I didn't get the proportions right, and the anatomy's wrong, and the perspective is off, and and you're just constantly working on those things. Now the other side of it is something that I think they don't teach anymore very often in art schools anymore, or I see a lot of it on the internet though, and that is taking what you've learned and then processing it in your own mind and your imagination, and then recreating it into something that's your own. You're not drawing from life, you're inventing. Like, let's say you're drawing a figure, a human figure in some position. Well, taking the knowledge you have of proportions, anatomy, and all of those things, you sit down with just paper and pencil or whatever your drawing medium is, and you start drawing, and you invent. And I think that in the end result, if you push something like that to a very highly realistic finish, you're doing a combination of both. A little bit of observation from life and a little bit of observation and a lot of imagination. I think Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling, the figures on that ceiling, he didn't have somebody sit down and pose in those positions. He invented all that stuff, but he probably had models pose to get detail, to work out anatomy, but he probably, when you work at this stuff long enough, you start memorizing it, and you start understanding it, and that's the place you want to get to. You keep working toward that. That's probably a long-winded answer. Hopefully I could demonstrate some stuff I do, and that's what I want to be able to do on the channel too. Again, I see myself as a companion in the struggle, not any kind of master of anything. And that's what I want to make clear. There's a lot of artists out there that are way better than me. But anyway, I still stay with it anyway, because it's that process that's really important. There's something about doing art that's just as important as the actual pieces that you end up with, because it does something to you when you're doing the art. There's something important about that process. So, Mr. BlindViews, you might be BlindViews yourself, but that's the way I see it.